Miscommunication. So if you've ever played the game of telephone, where one person has an idea and they whisper it to someone else and then they whisper it to someone else, by the time it gets to the last person, the message is totally changed and garbled and miscommunicated. So the idea is, how can you make your message as clear as possible? So here's an interesting communication, right? I'm giving you this lecture, you're recording myself through PowerPoint, and I've got my microphone and lights on and whatever, and you're watching me, hopefully on your computer, maybe on your mobile device. We could be doing this class face-to-face, and that would obviously be a different form of communication, right? A different channel of communication. But still, there's certain things that always remain the same, even whether we use raw kind of face-to-face, interpersonal communication, or we use high-tech technology to make our message clear. So to have an effective communication, the idea is that the sender of the message and the receiver of the message are both playing on the same field. And this communication has a certain goal or a certain kind of meaning to it that you want to make sure gets from one point to the other. It can be sidetracked. So here is the basic model of communication, and the idea is that on the left side there we have our sender. So they want to say something like, gee, I'm going to be late for class. Could be something like that, right? And they need to then choose to have a certain channel of communication. So are they going to text it? Are they going to email it? Are they going to tell their friend to tell the instructor in class? And then the message is, well, I'm going to be late for class, or it could be why I'm going to be late too. You may want to enhance that. We'll talk a little bit more about it. And then on the other end, the person is going to get that message, and they're going to have to decode it. So how is the coding? Is it understanding, the language of English and decoding it that way? Or is it reading the symbols that make up an English, sentence and decoding it that way? So the idea is that there can be a shared experience. Obviously, we need to both speak English and understand English so that we can understand this message. Or could have subtitles or something, right? So this is the idea of shared experience. And then there's the inevitable noise. So there's all kinds of noise that could interfere with the message. My phone battery went dead. I didn't get the message. There's all kinds of semantic noise and things like that, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. And then we have this feedback loop where maybe I respond to the text and say, okay, I'm waiting for you. Or I don't respond, or I respond, don't bother coming. That could be negative feedback, or positive feedback. I'm sorry you're late. I'll, hold the lecture until you get here, or something like that. So the idea that the message kind of comes full circle. So I think one of the key things here is that when you're drafting a message, whether it's in business or a personal message, that you really understand what the purpose of your message is and what the intended goal or outcome of that message is. What you expect the person who's on the other end receiving your message is going to do when they read your message, and you want that to be successful. So encoding the message for the sender, let's say you're writing a business memo, is your choice of words. They convey a certain information, also a certain kind of maybe mood or emotion, immediacy, sloppiness, meticulousness, whatever it is. So the idea is that you want to be careful of your choice of words. You want to make sure they're clear, so avoiding slang words, colloquialisms as they may be called. You talk to your friends differently than you talk to your boss, that kind of feel, and making sure that you understand who is going to be on the receiving end of this message and, what their experience is, what they're expecting kind of. And obviously in a global economy, the idea of international kind of messages, English is a kind of universal language, and it can be used, but it can also be misinterpreted or misunderstood. And I know we talked a little bit about the Chevy Nova last week, so this is the idea of kind of lost in translation. So, choosing the right channel. It's really important to think, what is the channel that I'm going to use for this message and how it's going to be received through that channel, and then weighing in other things like how effective that channel is, how economical it is. Should I send an email or a snail mail, right? So there's kind of a different feel to those two kind of communications. And then thinking about the noise. How can I reduce that noise? So for instance, on a PowerPoint slide like I'm using here, which I'm not really that wild about actually, but it works for this online situation, the idea of maybe having too much text on the slide, or the text is too small. Maybe I made a misspelling, or I used a misword or something like that. Or I used a bad font that you really can't read, or it's annoying to read. It's all caps or something like that. So there's all kinds of ways to kind of have interference to that message. Some of them I can control. I can use the right font and use the right sizing, use different colors to make things stand out. Other things I can't control. On your end, if you're watching this, you may get a phone call while you're, watching it on your mobile device and stop watching it. Or you may just, hate it and stop watching it. So there's all kinds of, ways that the message can be interfered with on both ends. Some of it I can control, some of it I can't control. Of course, the thing is, I want to make sure that the receiver of that message, when they get it, they understand my intent of what the communication actually is. And a lot of times that could be interfered with, and that's some of the things that we're going to look at this week, and how we can really fine-tune and hone our message so that it is received in a positive way and an accurate way. So then this idea of feedback, right? So we're sitting around and I'm talking to you and I see your face looks like this. It probably means that maybe you're not that interested. On the other hand, if you look like this, then it might be a little bit more receptive to me, that it looks like, my delivery is going over pretty well. So you can nod your head, yeah. Ooh, that's interesting, right? So those kind of things can, give a certain kind of feedback. A lot of times in an email, the feedback might be, replying to that email. And of course, now the feedback is delayed, right? So I don't have that immediate feedback that I had in our interpersonal exchange. Now I have to wait for you to respond to that email or text. So that delay can actually cost lots of benefits, in that time frame. So, the idea is I can also kind of ask for that feedback, right? I can say something like, please respond with any questions. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you, or just, let me know that you got this email. I can even have, you can have a read response, right? So I know that you actually read it too. You can program your phone to let people know that you've actually seen the message. Now, obviously, if you do that, people know that you've read the message, and then they may be even more expecting, like, well, I saw you read it, but you didn't respond. So be careful how you have those settings in your, your messaging, your phone. So there are lots of ways that you can really kind of break it down and, think about how your message can be as effective as possible. Of course, having a strategy, having an idea of what I want this message to accomplish, who is my target audience, thinking about what their background is, how much do I have to inform them, can I keep it short, how will the various channels affect this, what techniques can I use to optimize the experience. All those things, can kind of make your message much clearer and also much more effective. Again, if you're doing it live right away, someone can raise their hand and say, excuse me, but I don't understand what you said there. Obviously, that's a lot harder when you're drafting a letter or an email message or a text. You're not going to get that response. Well, the text, you might get it soon, hopefully, and the email. But, other times you might have to anticipate or wait to see what that response is before you then use that feedback of the response to then craft the next communication. Okay, so you want to think about, what do I want to accomplish with this message? How can I keep it as short, what I mean is concise, and accurate as possible? So I don't need to say too much extra. I just want to get the point across. So an economy of words. A lot of people in business are very busy, so they don't want to read, a whole bunch of background information if they don't have to. So the idea is that you want to present your message as succinctly as possible and think about it from the audience's point of view. So this three-step process of kind of planning the message first, then kind of drafting it out and doing a lot of revisions on it. So after you do a quick draft, you proofread it, right? You read it through and you think to yourself, how can I fine-tune this? You might find spelling errors, you might find more appropriate words, you might be able to cut some fat out, move things around, all those kind of things, and basic idea of how you kind of word process something to make it as clear as possible. So this three-step process can take a logical approach, and the idea of researching it first, organizing your ideas, and then making that draft. So let's say I wanted to craft a message saying we no longer have to wear masks in class at FIT. The idea would be to first gather some research information. Is this, a good practice? Does the CDC recommend this? Are other universities doing it? Let's look at our previous correspondence about mask wearing. How do other administrators feel about it? Then we start to organize our idea and crafting that message. You can also have this, what's in it for me thing, the idea of structuring the message and having either a soft sell, more like a PR kind of sell, or, think about the silver linings. I could say something like, gee, wearing a mask can protect you no matter what, or, it's cold out and wearing a mask might, make you feel better in the cold. So, and then when we start our draft, the idea of, again, thinking about that audience and making sure that we're really, again, putting ourselves in their shoes as the reader to make sure that it's as clear as possible. You can read it yourself. I like reading my messages out loud sometimes. You can find little things that might be awkward if you read it than if you're just, if you're reading it out loud and speaking it, than if you're just reading it. Also, just share it with someone. Take a look at this. What do you think about it? Because a lot of times you're wearing blinders, thinking about your own message. We call it producer's bias. You're so wrapped up in it, you don't realize sometimes how it's being perceived. So having an unbiased partner who might, be able to read it and say, hey, why don't you try it this way, might help you to get better clarity. Okay, so same thing here, the idea of, again, fine-tuning it, editing it, thinking about your audience. Again, people in business, oftentimes, like, for instance, when I look at emails, one of my big pet peeves is an email with no subject line. So it just, has no subject, right? So I don't really know what it's about. Obviously, that subject line can really tell me right away what is the importance of this. Should I put this at the top of my priority stack? I'm going to read it right away. So, having a clear subject line, just like a headline in an advertisement, is going to let the reader know what this is about. And then throughout the piece, structuring it, a lot of times using a bulleted or a numbered list. Obviously, bulleted list means, you kind of break things down into fragmented sentences. You can kind of keep it short. It's easy to kind of scan. If it's a numbered list, then it's kind of prioritized too. It has some kind of chronological or importance order. And then, obviously proofreading it, running it through the spell check. Use programs that can help you. Grammarly, the free version of Grammarly. You can put it right into Gmail. I find it helps me all the time to help me, find a quick error or awkwardness, fine-tune something before I send it out. And then, again, read it from the point of view of the person that you're sending it to. How well is it crafted? What is the tone? What do you think they're going to feel when they read it? So what I do is I don't hit send right away, right? I want to read it through first. And then I also have a delay built in my Gmail, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this so that if you do hit send by accident, or just, inadvertently too fast, you can pull a message back for, whatever time you specify. So, and then, did you encourage some kind of feedback after the person reads the message? I always think in a, kind of marketer's point of view, what is the call to action? So what do I want you to do in response to this? And I want to prompt that person in the message to, do that response. Please let me know if you have questions. Please respond. And you might want to put something like, please respond by a certain time or date, so that there is a clear, call to action here. So now we have this idea of informational and persuasive messages. So I might be, writing a message. Let's say we're, researching a new monitor for, use in a classroom. So I might, have an informational piece that says things like, well, what the size should be, what the technology should be. Should it be LED, LCD, OLED? What the advantages are of all those things, balancing it out with cost and sustainability and readability and all those things, right? So this is kind of an informational message that describes, the facts. Then I can have a persuasive message where I say, there's no doubt that Samsung is going to be the best choice here because, I own a Samsung and I love it, and or it might even be Samsung who's drafting this message. So you can buy any OLED TV, but your best choice is going to be a Samsung, and that's the reason why, right? So the idea of a persuasive message kind of having a built-in hidden agenda in there. So a lot of messages are repurposed, recycled, forwarded, right? Your email could be forwarded. And the idea is that you might have a primary audience and also then a secondary audience. So I might draft an email to one of my colleagues here, and then they forward it to the president of the college. Did I know that the president was going to see my email? I don't know, right? So the idea is that you want to kind of have those things in mind, where that email might go. Remember, that's going to be a permanent record. You can't take it back. So who is your primary reader? What is my relationship with them, or, kind of mutually shared experience? How much of the subject matter do they know, or do I need to fill them in on it? Thinking about things like demographics and psychographics, right? So I'm going to craft a different message to different audiences. So we want to analyze that audience and think about, who they are, where they are, and then how they're going to perceive that message there. And then think about that secondary reader. Where is that message going to go? Do I need to, have more background information in there? Do I need to kind of reshape that message, or have it kind of universally crafted so that anyone can understand it? Does that make sense? So here's an example like that. So let's say that I'm crafting a message about why you should wear a mask during, the pandemic. So I could be sending that message to a classroom of kindergartners and how they can, benefit themselves and their teacher and their parents by wearing a mask. I would probably have a different message, although the outcome is the same, if I was crafting this message to a group of senior citizens. So maybe different language. Obviously I would tone it down to the kindergartners. I would have a different kind of tone, a different kind of mood for, my different respective target audiences. Then I'm going to think about, channels. How am I going to actually send this message? We talked about a couple of them already. Face-to-face is really great. It's golden. You're right there. You can take feedback right away. You can tailor it. You can continue to adapt your message. The idea of the technology that's available. So maybe I only have a pencil to give my message, or a pencil and a message in a bottle. How important the message is, so how it's perceived. Obviously if I write it in pencil or I scribble it, it may not look as important as if I send it as a formal email. The idea of feedback, right? So, and we talked about that immediacy, how fast I can get feedback on it. The cost of the channel. Email might be free. Do I need to create a video for this person so they can really see what's going on? And that might incur more cost, more time, but end up with a much clearer message. Confidentiality of the message. And then what is the receiver's preference? You know, sometimes I send messages to my mom and she's like, I didn't get it. And I know she got it, but she didn't really know how to open it or whatever. So that's not good, right? And then maybe using multiple channels for a really important message. You want to have a kind of almost a campaign where you have multiple channels. And I just have like the snapshot up there compared to the Gmail. The idea is, you know, of course, the Snapchat message is immediate. It kind of disappears after a while. And then the Gmail is a permanent record. So someone can, you know, comb back through emails that you sent them years ago and, you know, kind of put together a chronological loop of, you know, this topic. So then you're going to think about the richness of the channel. So this is kind of like its capability, right? So you think of something like, well, print, you know, I'm reading it in the newspaper, it's text. It has pictures. Radio, on the other hand, is just audio. It doesn't have any pictures. Television or video has everything, right? So it has the capability of pictures, video, text, audio. It's all there. So it's a richer medium. And then the idea of feedback. So if I'm doing a live stream with a chat, I can have immediate feedback and I can take questions and I can kind of, again, tailor this communication to my audience and their preferences. The wrong channel can also send the wrong message. So maybe it was inappropriate to respond this way when you should have responded another way. So thinking about, you know, which channel is really going to be the right one to carry your message. So here's an idea. We want to sell new makeup, right? So we can have a personal salesperson, say, on the floor of Ulta, and they can, you know, have a certain interaction. They can look at the person who is interested in the makeup and make some suggestions based on their skin and their age and, you know, various things, and they can show them a couple of different products and really kind of, you know, get their feedback and feel it out. So this is personal selling. I can also put this in a magazine ad, right? So think about this image in a magazine ad with a headline and some body copy, you know, typical formula. I can have it on social media, right? So on social media, you know, it has a certain immediacy and a certain channeling that, you know, will reach a certain audience and different feel to it, right? So then again, I can put it on YouTube where, you know, now I have the makeup not just sitting there, but it's also being demoed, you know. We can really kind of talk about best practices to apply it, you know. Should I use this brush, that brush? You know, where am I going with this makeup on? What time of day am I going to be out there? All those kind of things. I could use direct mail. Maybe I have an email marketing plan where I open my email and I see this makeup there. Or again, I use radio. So now in radio, you won't be able to see it at all, but I'll be able to describe it for you. So if I said something, just close your eyes for a second. A palette of every natural color, rich earth tones, beautiful pastels. So the idea, again, of the copy, you can open your eyes now, is that, you know, I can create an image in your mind that might be better than the image you're looking at right now, right? So everybody will have a unique image in their mind that is, you know, sometimes referred to as theater of the mind, right? So, and I don't even have to pay for the image or the video or the photographer and all that editing and has to go into it. In a radio commercial, I just have to have good copy and a good read, maybe with music, that creates this whole theater of the mind where everybody has their own image there. So again, you might craft your message, again, based on your intended receiver. So imagine that you are going to be late for class. You could be texting your friend why I'm going to be late to class, and then you'd be doing a totally different message, sending an email to your instructor of why you're going to be late to class, right? It's going to have a different, you know, tone, maybe different content, different language use. Hopefully the reason that you're being late is valid and it's, you know, the same for both. You're not just, you know, telling your instructor you're going to be late because you're meeting your friend for coffee, right? Something like that wouldn't be good. Again, thinking about your intended audience would specify the kind of content, mood, nature of your message, and also may also dictate what channel you'd be putting that message on. So another key thing here is this idea of empathetic writing, and it's, again, putting yourself in the shoes of the reader, and what's in it for them. Why do they want to read your message? What are they going to get at it? I got that Ben Franklin quote there. To be good, it ought to have a tendency to benefit the reader. So solve the reader's problems. Maybe I, get a gig where I have to write a PSA for Gamblers Anonymous. And I'm not a gambler myself, maybe I play the lottery once in a while, but I'm not really into, playing cards or, going to casinos. So in order to really craft this message, I could fake it. But probably the best thing to do is a whole bunch of research first to find out, what is in a gambler's mindset and what makes them, do the behaviors that they do, and then try to then craft the copy from a learned point of view where I can really try to be effective and help someone instead of just trying to fake it. So the use of pronouns also kind of sends a certain tonal message about, your communication. So, if you say I, it's different than saying we, and it's different than saying you. So who's in the benefit here? Sometimes a hard sell will overuse you, but I like the use of you because it kind of, hits the reader instead of it being, you're reading about me, you're reading about yourself. So I think that kind of makes the message a little bit more engaging, a little bit more intimate when you use the right pronouns. And just to start, wrapping up here, the idea of this kind of tone too. A lot of times I find that reading the message really helps. Sometimes even working backwards where, you would actually dictate the message. So use some type of voice recognition software and just dictate the message by explaining it and then transcribing it from that. That might be a good way to make sure that it is somewhat conversational, that it is also succinct, because a lot of times when you start writing something, you may overwrite it. You want to make sure that, again, it is as clean and short as possible. So recording it with dictation software can really help with that. And then also just reading it aloud and recording it and playing it back and kind of getting a feel of how it actually sounds. And I think when you talk about like the mood or the tonality of the message, one of the things, I pulled this right out of Grammarly, is like, after I write a message, it'll give me one of these emojis and say, this message sounds curious or surprised or, happy. So it could be very encouraging where, I'm telling a student you did really well on this, or it could be something where, you want to make sure that they go back and rewrite that. So it might be something more like concerned. So, the idea is, again, install Grammarly. You can use this to help you, but I think effective messages go along the lines of this positive. Sometimes you really have to criticize someone, but you can do it constructively and still have a positive kind of tone to it, instead of, talking down to someone in a message. Make sure that the outcome is always going to be positive, and I think your message will be much more readily received. And then just like the idea of being professional. So know who you're talking to in a business situation. You don't want to use first names. Sometimes I see students emailing me and they're like, Michael. My name is Michael, but I prefer to be called Professor Coquinos by students because it is a form of respect, and in a certain environment, it's kind of expected. So, you're thinking about all of those kind of contextual things of how your message is being channeled and received. You can tell right away too, like, you get on the phone to complain about some kind of customer service, or doing it in person, and the idea of what kind of feedback you're getting from that person. Are they really listening to you? Are they just giving you lip service? Are they actually being argumentative? And then what is your perception then afterwards of the brand, and will you go back to shop there depending on the kind of message that you receive from them. So you really want to think about all those things in the context, and sometimes obviously it comes with practice, It might be something that is harder to plan if it's, something immediate that's happening, say, on the retail floor, if you're dissatisfied with something, than if you're, crafting it as a cover letter or an email where you really have a chance to do your research, draft, revise, and get an idea of what the feedback is going to be like. And then you want to kind of reread your message for its political correctness, right? You don't want to call people out on things like gender, identity, disability, age. You want to be careful about using those kind of terms in a correspondence, in a communication, unless you have to. I mean, unless it's actually intended for a certain audience, then you might use it effectively in there. But for the most part, you want to keep it politically correct. And then again, all kinds of tools. Use them to help you. I put my messages oftentimes through ChatGPT and ask, how is this? Or can you shorten it? Can you summarize it? And that'll give you a good idea of, how it can be evolved. Sometimes if someone's talking to you, you can't say, oh, excuse me a minute, I got to consult my AI here. So obviously you want to make sure that you're comfortable in communicating. But, using things like Grammarly, the dictionary. I love using a thesaurus, especially for copywriting, the idea of wordsmithing and just finding the right word. In English, there are so many words that have similar meanings, but when you're thinking about what you're really trying to say and who you're really trying to say it to, oftentimes the thesaurus will say, yeah, this is exactly the right word for my target audience and my intended communication objectives. So I hope you enjoyed today's lecture, and I'm going to, load up some interesting assignments that will hopefully relate to this process of business communication, and also give you some exercise in that area so that you can hone your skills.